Hey everyone and welcome back. Now in today's video we'll be discussing about the configuration directory in console. So as of now we have been running console with multiple command line options like we have been using join, bind, datadir, HCL and so on. So although this seems good as a starting point, but in a longer term it is not very scalable and efficient. So let's say you are making use of 15 options for production environments, then you cannot always specify 15 option in the command line all the time. So instead of that, what you can do is you can start console from a configuration directory, and the configuration directory in turn has all of the options that are required to start the console agent. So once you have the configuration directory set up, you no longer have to specify join, bind, datadir and so on. Everything will go inside the file which is under the configuration directory path. Now one important part to remember as we are seeing is that the agent has various configuration options that can be specified via the command line. So this is something that we have been doing, or it can also be specified within the configuration files. Now configuration file can either be written within the JSON or an HCL format. Now if you look into this specific screenshot, you have console agent, you are specifying a -config -directory, and you are specifying the path where your configuration directory is present, which is root console-config, which in turn contains the appropriate configuration file in either JSON or HCL format. So let's do one thing, let's have a quick demo, post which we'll be discussing things in more detail. So currently I'm connected to the console.02 server. Now as we are discussing, till now we have been making use of a specific command line option to explore various functionality. So this works perfectly well. In fact, let's try it out. So here you see it is working perfectly well. However, this is not something that we'll be using in a longer term. In a longer term, we'll be making use of a configuration directory. So let's also explore that. So let's do a Control-C, and I have a directory called as console-config. So let's quickly go inside this directory, and inside here I have a configuration file based on HCL format. So as we are discussing, there are two formats primarily, one is the JSON and second is HCL. So our configuration file is written based on HCL. So let's quickly do a cat on the configuration file over here, and within this you'll see that there are multiple options. One is related to data directory, then you have one related to join, you have one related to the bind address. So everything is specified here. So let's quickly find that out. So if you look into the command, so join, you have the IP address of the console server, so the same can be found over here. Then within the bind you have the IP address of this client, same can be found over here. And within the data directory you have root console, and same is configured over here. So this is more like an alternative to the command line options. So let's go ahead and start the console with the configuration file. So I'll say console agent config dir is equal to the path of the configuration directory, which is console-config. And now you see, as expected, things are working perfectly well, similar to how it used to work in CLI. Now to verify if things are working perfectly, let's go to nodes, and you should see both the nodes available here. So if you're planning to make use of configuration file, few important thing to remember here is that the CLI and configuration file options are not always named the same. So for example, for CLI command we make use of join. However, in configuration file it is start_join. For CLI it is bind. For configuration it is bind_addr and so on. So there'll be a little change over here, but the overall functionality would remain to be the same. Now let me quickly show you. So within the documentation where we are looking into the agent configuration, I'll also add a link to this in our GitHub repo. So within the configuration, here you will see that you have a command line option. So these are the options that we used to use earlier. However, when you go a bit down, you have a second category of configuration file, and within configuration file you again have a specific set of options. So these are the options that you need to make use of within the configuration file. So in case if you try to make use of command line options within the configuration file, it might not work. So this is something that you need to be aware of. Now one more thing, let's quickly find out. So let's do a control F on bind and let's go beta. So here you see that you have an option of bind, and in fact this is associated with a command line option, and this is something that we used to use. However, as we are discussing in the configuration file, it is bind underscore addr. So if you look into bind underscore addr, you will get the information which states that it is equivalent to the bind command line flag. So this is a useful thing that we need to remember. And going to the console config, let's quickly do a cat again on console.hcl. Now one important part to remember is that you can go ahead and skip certain configuration within the configuration file, and then you can add it as part of the command line option. So this is also something that can be done. So let's do one thing. For ease of use, let me create one more directory. I'll create in root and I'll call as console new config. Now within this directory, let's quickly go to this directory. Let's create a file called as console.hcl, or you can name it according to what you require. So let's do a vi, or if you have a nano, you can make use of nano as well. So currently I have nano available. In case if you do not have a nano available, you can run the yum-y install nano command. Anyway, so let's do a nano. Let's call it as console.hcl, and for our ease of use, what we'll do, let's copy all the three options and I'll paste it over here. And within here, we'll go ahead and remove the data directory part. So we'll only make use of the start join and the bind addr. Now we already know that if you do not specify a data dir, then the console agent will not start. So let's try it out on how we can get around this. So once you have your HCL configured, you can start the console with config dir. Let's specify root console new config, and immediately you got an error stating that the data dir cannot be empty. So you can also go ahead and specify command line options here. So let's say data dir, which is root console. Alright, so it seems there is a spacing issue here. So let's add a space after root console here. So now let's go ahead and run it. And you see it works perfectly well. Great. So I hope at a high level overview you understood the basics of configuration directory. Now it is also very important that you are familiar with this, because in production environments, making use of configuration directory to load various options for starting console is something that you will be doing. So with this, we'll conclude today's video.